Well, here, while you're doing that, I'm gonna call to order the Board of Assessment Review. This is January 27th, present, Steve Salisbury, Jared Wilbur, Bruce Sawyer, Steve Salisbury, and me. We have to do elections. We have to elect a chair and a secretary. Anybody have a motion?
I nominate Jeff and Steve.
There's a motion, I can second that. All in favor of Steve as secretary, me as the chairman?
Who's seconding it?
Let's have Steve Shade second it. And then let's vote. Who wants me, chairman? Me. It's
As long as you're buying, I'm all in favor of Jeff.
Did Steve bring his credit card? Okay, so I'm emperor again. Now,
Don't let it go to your head.
I'm gonna wait for your client to come back in here.
I'm here.
All right, is she streaming? Okay, first item of business, request of Romaine, how do you say that?
Romaine.
Romaine Turn, Turyn.
Turin.
Turin and Adrian Turin. You want to reunite the Salisbury Island and Teachers Island because Larry separated them for assessment purpose and reverse creation of two lots. And you've also got an abatement request in. We'll discuss that, okay? As far as our record goes, we have applications for both properties. There's two, the distinguishing feature of each is on the front of each page. One says Teachers Island and one says Salisbury Island. My understanding is Salisbury Island contains the building and Teachers Island is vacant. It's right next door. We'll discuss that later. A part of the application process, you've outlined and included assessment information. You've also included, for both properties, a letter dated September 19th, 2019 from Lake and Dennison to Larry Gardner, outlining your position on various matters. You also have included some exhibits, A1, the copy of the deed, your evaluation from 1718 for one, and then the other property, some other various tax stuff that you printed offline that's available to anybody, their property, another tax assessment. You got basically all the assessment information in there for both pieces. You've got an A2 which shows a picture of the property, an exhibit B which talks about the dwelling water, and you've highlighted that for us. That's halfway down, minimum lot size, which I want to discuss. You've got an exhibit C, which talks about non-conforming lots, which must relate to the what's previous, and you've highlighted some stuff for us. And then you've got an exhibit D, exhibit E, exhibit F, all with tax information. You can explain why you put those in there. You are basically an argument about different treatment, but I will point out D and then E. The island on E is actually owned by Steve Shave's cousin. He lives right down the street, and I spent my summers out there as a kid. Does that bother you?
Not at all.
Thank you. We all know what it looks like, okay? So if you want to reference that one. And Phyllis and Cindy Thibodeau and Phyllis Eiley were formerly Shays. They were my babysitters from the age of 2.5 till. We had Barbara Amine from 1 through whatever, right? And then Phyllis let us drive at the age of 5. She had a Volkswagen. So, anyway, that's the record from appellants. And do you want anything else that you want to add?
I did bring the most current real estate tax bill with me, but it's also available online if you want it. Only
That will
to
be part of the
only to
record, just
show-
mark it, give it to
Yep,
Lori, and we'll
that's all.
include it. If you have anything else you want, I consider your application, all attachments, part of the record. If you want to go beyond us, or if he wants to go beyond us, if you're unhappy, yippee-yi-yay, but you will have a record, and this is what's a record. From the city, we have two, I printed off both, I think it's formatting, but they're both the same. Are they two different things?
This right here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It came in two formats, I printed them off.
Oh, yeah, one was Word in case people.
Okay, but we have your arguments, and then we have Appendix 1, 2, 3, a lot of case law cited. And everybody's got everything?
Yeah, that
Now-
was sent to the,
For the record, I sent an email back, and I said, I hope the appellants are on this chain,
yeah,
and I raised a question. Before you came in, Larry, I asked if she had seen that, and she said she had, and I asked if there'd been a response, and then I asked you when you got here, if that was a response that you want, and we'll address that. So what I'd like to do is, I think the facts are pretty much agreed. You own property with your sister. They're two islands. They're connected as described, whether they're islands or not, we'll fight over that. But Larry, in his, he separated them. He made them two lots when they used to be one, correct? I got the initial appraised value of when they were combined as being, it's one of the exhibits. What was the original, before you divided them, what'd you appraise it at, land building?
For the last 2 years, they've been divided, so 3 years ago, I believe the total was 66,000
For both?
66,600.
For land?
It's in the.
for land and buildings.
Okay, so you went from 66 divided by 2, and then, now the one lot with the building has, you have land at 40,900 and building at 22,200, so you value with it, which would be the Salisbury lot at 63,100, and then you value Teacher's lot, which does not have a building on it, at 31,400, correct? Those facts are not disputed. And then you're looking for abatement. Well, we'll discuss that, because you basically say assessed value 4023 land, you want the owner's requested value 0. And I think what you want to do is combine them both
Combine
back
back, yeah.
and make one value for both.
Exactly.
All right, so I have a question, and this may solve the whole problem, maybe it won't. In my email, I asked, and I asked this because I want to know if there's a taking. When the city divided and made these separate properties, it made them not meet certain size requirements, and you point that out in your third argument and your fourth argument. And then you've attached, showing the shoreline zoning stuff, that these are not conforming lots. Larry, how do you respond?
The two islands are connected by a bar. Within that bar is, well, I should start off by saying, for all land, that's shorefront land, we don't assess the flats. It's only the upland area above normal high water. We don't assess the area between normal low water and normal high water. So, but even in between these two islands, there is a tight little 10-foot channel that separates them. It makes it so that they're not contiguous, because the state owns the land below normal high water.
Yeah, but here's my point. I get where you're going, but look, Exhibit B to her submission says they need 80,000 square feet per lot. And she argues that when you, on your own, divided these out, they become lot sizes with 66,000, wait, no, I'm sorry.
That's the value.
Value. 54,000 is one, which is below the 80,000, and one is 65,000 square feet, which is below. Does she now have two lots she can't sell? And if she can't sell them, you've taken her property, made it worthless.
Well, what I have to do is assess them as they should be. So if I notice that they're not two parcels, where before they were assessed as one, but if I learn that they're really not, it's by law, I cannot continue assessing those as one parcel.
How do you respond? As you'll see, we'll go back and forth, because I just viewed that as, if what I'm proposing is you've made these two lots non-sellable and non-usable, the town, the government, the great government of Ellsworth, has basically taken their property and made them useless. They can't sell them. Can't sell them because anybody buy them, well, somebody will buy it, but then they've got zoning problems. So that's sort of my first inquiry. That's why I sent the email. That just struck me as maybe this is decisive of this case, and we need to put them back together as one.
That is my argument, is that if my client had deeded away half of the island, she would be subject to enforcement action by the code enforcement officer for creating a non-conforming lot, and she'd be subjected to fines, there's all kinds of penalties there, and it would be an unmarketable piece of property. So if she can't do it, how is it that the tax assessor, without her consent or even knowledge, can do it? So I absolutely, that's our primary argument, is you're creating two non-conforming lots here, that were never separated before. Of course, our argument is also that, this is one island, with two parts, separated by a bar that's exposed most of the time, and especially at low water. The state owns below the normal low water line of the lake, not the normal high water line.
No, that's
And
what I
this is-
said.
No, I'm sorry, I think I
No, I
may have
said, I
misheard you.
said
thought you
normal,
said high.
low water line.
And
we
of course, Branch
go
Lake
back
is an
to the-
impoundment.
Hey, listen,
Transcript if we need to.
One talking at once, Larry, you'll get plenty of time to respond, thank
And
you.
Branch Lake is an impoundment, right? So there's a dam that's artificially raising and lowering the water here. And those of you who grew up on the lake, it sounds like you're nodding your heads and knowing a lot more about the levels
He
here than
lives
I do.
there, Steve's got a place up there, do you have a place up there?
So my client who grew
Place.
up going to this island can also testify that for years, she's walked dry-footed to both parts of this one island without any problem. And so the argument that these are not somehow contiguous parcels of land, we would say the evidence dictates otherwise, just looking at the photo. So yeah, that is our primary argument, that this separation has created two unsellable, unmarketable, non-conforming lots contrary to the ordinance,
And your solution would be to recombine them as into one.
which is also provided for in the ordinance. If you own two contiguous lots, one's developed and one's undeveloped, they have to be combined to the extent that you can make a conforming lot. So it's, the remedy's right in the land use ordinance. I can show you the section, it's exhibit, I think I put it in as exhibit C.
Steve, do you have any comment on this? I mean, you deal with this stuff all the time.
Just.
Am I hitting the nail on the head, or am I just,
Well, you're close, just the whole equity of the equation, Larry, we go from a $66,000 value to a $94,000 value. Nothing physically has changed, other than they have two tax accounts rather than one. Why not just put $1,000 on the non-buildable island and put $65,000 on the island with a house on it?
well, that's the assessed value, but I'm talking about, she's
You
asking to
didn't, let me, I
Okay.
asked him a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Well, when I reassessed all the islands, it wasn't just this one, it was based on sales, and islands are of just different sizes and different lakes. So, and when I discovered this was actually two islands, by law, I can't combine them. By law, I can't.
That aside, okay, that aside,
What law is that, Larry? What statute is that exactly?
Well, there's, it's actually 7, I believe I have it in there.
I looked up the one that you had in there, and it said that one had been repealed,
The 701,
708,
708,
at least the
and there's a recent court case on that. Perrin, the Perrin case.
Petron, actually.
Petron?
Petron versus
Yep.
Armstrong.
That's if the assessor down in Scarborough was just, if a homeowner were to come in, they had a small lot, and then they had a house lot beside it, they were contiguous. The assessor, just upon the property owner coming in and saying, I wish to combine these two, the assessor would combine them.
But isn't that a mainland lot and an island? This is two islands. You don't have any, what I would consider mainland lot property, right? You just
Yes.
own two
Oh,
islands.
She owns a completely separate mainland lot that's unrelated to this case.
That gives us
Yeah.
access
Yeah.
right of way.
The Petron case was about the arbitrariness of having your two lots combined for tax purposes if you went in and asked for it, which discriminated against those people who didn't know whether or not they were supposed to come in and ask for it. And so the law court said you have to treat all people that have an abutting, non-conforming small lot to a developed lot the same, whether or not they knew to come in and ask to have them merged or not. So that's what that case was.
And that's basically what they're asking for, is for the assessor to combine these two. And I can't do it, just by.
well, how did you come to a valuation of $31,000 for a little spit of land that you can't do anything with?
Well, that's what those are worth. You, the.
No, I asked you, how do you come to that valuation? Do you other islands on Branch Lake or any other lake? that are
Yes.
That small?
Yes, and the formula came to be, the islands are about 20% of the mainland shorefront properties for the same size.
Even though there's
An
no
80%.
possibility of building on them whatsoever now?
An 80% reduction, yes,
That's 80% reduction?
yes.
Put a picnic table on
But you.
Wait a second, so 30%, 80, is, 30, this land is worth 150,000 if it's
I was
built?
gonna say, the math is,
Ooh, that's not right, Larry.
You've got a 1.25 acres and a 1.5 acres. So,
but you need two to build on now.
well, I didn't, the minus 80% is based on being unbuildable. If it was buildable, it would have more money, it would have more value.
Yeah, but not $150,000 for an island up there, come on.
There's no access, you gotta have a boat. I mean, there's gotta be a discount for having to have a boat to get there, or a kayak or something.
Yeah, but that's what they sell for.
Oh, come on now.
That's what islands sell for.
Maybe in the ocean.
There's five of us, but we ain't that stupid. I'm not that stupid
Larry,
anyway.
no.
You're not getting any traction here.
No.
There's no
I want to
way.
go back. When he divided this out, did he make it so she has now a worthless bunch of land? Because she can't sell it. Because if he
I think
did,
if you can sell it, it's not,
it, just not buildable.
just not buildable.
You can use it
but
for
you've still
recreation
taken
purposes.
value from
Of
her.
course they have.
You can't
And that's a
sell it.
taking, which you
sell
can't
it
do
as a
when you assess. You're not supposed to take. I mean, Larry is there any question that Larry, I understand assessing islands and doing that, but on his own, he divided these out because of the
That's what the law
dynamics and
says.
graphics of these islands and the water up and down, but, I mean, it just strikes me that he's created more of a problem for them than he's solved for the city. I mean, I get it, you own it and you get to pay taxes, yeah. But what do you do with it? I mean, we're not gonna live forever, don't take that the wrong way. And when your kids don't want to, when, you know the problems that happens, there's 800, and that nobody pays the taxes. What are they supposed to do with this thing?
On the
Did you see
flips-
did you see the list of sales that I included here?
Yeah, but they're unbuildable lots, aren't they, Larry?
Unbuildable lots, and the assessed value on the sales average about 75%, the assessed value to sale price. And some of those are old sales too.
If you look at that list, it's his appendix 2 that lists
Yes.
sales. The top and bottom one do not have buildings on them. And if you look at those, which are a little different than the ones that already have buildings on them, that might be grandfathered into a nonconformity.
Yeah, I don't think the 6 and the 8 acre parcels are compatible. Those
No.
are buildable. So you have 3 compatible ones, maybe. And I don't think they're worth a lick, the small ones that are not buildable.
So the one in Graham Lake for .05 acres is valued at $900 here, versus the $31,000 that our pile of rocks is. And then there's a .57 and a .87 that both have existing structures on them.
The one on the Green Lake that you pointed to, what was that one valued at, the island?
The one that I pointed out in our
Right.
arguments, the one that had 7 different islands?
No,
or-
there was Phyllis's and
Thibodeau and I,
yeah, Thibodeau and Eiley. There was a list of islands, and it was towards the end of this package. What was that one valued at? Exhibit E, I believe it is.
Again, valuation is almost sort of the subtext of our argument. I mean, the argument here is, without any notice and consent of the property owner, he divided the property, made it non-conforming, renamed it, without asking her if she wanted to rename either part of the island, and so I think that sort of the abatement part of this is just to sort of undo that, put it back together and assess as one island as it was.
I don't disagree that Larry can't come up with a separate tax bill for this other island. But it can, that doesn't bother me too much. But the combined valuation between the 1 and the 2 to me should be pretty close to what the combined value was before they split.
Yeah.
Well, when I did the reassessment of all the islands, it didn't mean that the values we had before were the values that should have been on for assessed value. For the
I'll give you
correct
that, they might have been
assessment.
incorrect or
Yeah.
undervalued.
There's quite a few properties that actually went down quite a bit, island properties, because of this reassessment program. And
What if-
actually, the city actually lost about $100,000 in value
So, Green Lake.
after the reassessment.
So that'd be the $1,800 worth of taxes. So it cost us more
There's this-
than it was worth anyway.
Why would they go down? I'm just curious.
The values went down.
Why?
They weren't selling for as much, because they were way up here 10 years ago, and they're slowly dropping.
Well, there was a lot of inconsistency with measuring the acreage and the frontage and the way they were actually being assessed. It was not.
I don't even know if some of those islands were assessed.
There's quite a few, that were not assessed, that now are being assessed at just little tiny islands, like a
Yeah.
couple $1,000s in value, that were not assessed before.
Yeah.
There's quite a few.
Now, if they stop paying the taxes on Teachers Island with no building on it, city forecloses on it, then you got nothing,
Right?
right?
Well, the city would put it out for bid.
Nobody in the right mind would want it, I wouldn't think, but I guess you
It's
never
on
know.
Branch Lake.
Can't do anything with it.
Can't build it,
Can't cut the
can't.
trees on it, can't do
You
anything.
can't do nothing. Maybe you can take a boat to it, right?
Why did-
Have a picnic, and they say,
Yeah, but it's assessed commensurate with the sales of these other islands that were even smaller that sold, that I'm right underneath with their purchase price
I
for
guess
those
there's nobody's gonna-
unbuildable islands.
well, let's get back to, is what Larry did in this particular instance, is this something that should have been done, bottom line? Should he have done it? Should he have been allowed to take one property that was historically one property, it's in the description as one property, it's always been assessed as one property, and then break it into two, and then makes it now non-conforming lots under the thing, and then separate them out? Let's address that issue. Is what he did here okay? And what's your thoughts?
I might, if I might, please,
Yeah?
I could pass you out a map just of this immediate area, showing that there's the subject property in the middle, and there's a person down below who owns 2 islands, and there's one owner above that owns 2 islands. So if we're gonna combine these, we would have to combine those and all the other islands as well.
How are those deeded, though, Larry? How are those deeded? Are they deeded separately?
Deeding does not make one parcel. Because you could deed a parcel that's in Bar Harbor with a parcel that's in Ellsworth. So just because it's in one deed doesn't make it one parcel.
You're saying this little channel that's between the rocks, in the springtime, you can slip a canoe through maybe, or a kayak, is the separation, right? Just that little channel.
Yeah.
I'm not even familiar, I've been around that island 100 times, I can't even remember contemplating going between there.
So at no time is that island connected by land?
At almost all times.
Most
that
all the
island is
times,
connected.
yeah, I would surmise you
Well, I'm
couldn't paddle through
confused.
there.
So at some point in time, you could walk from island to island without getting your feet wet?
I can address that. For most of my childhood growing up, we walked across the sandbar to the other island and would play over there.
No, the sandbar's not underwater.
No, it was above what you could go in your
Keep 'em on,
sneakers.
keep your feet-
Right.
keep
I
your feet
believe it, as a child growing up, Bangor Hydro owned that dam, I think, and so the water fluctuated up and down. But during the summertime, there'd be lots of concerns about the lake because the water would drop. And you walked over to to the other part. And it was a great adventure. Now you can still walk across, but your feet get wet, but it doesn't come up to your knees or your ankles. You can't take a boat through there.
At any time during the year, is it dry?
It's solely a summer place for us, so I'm not there other
The
times.
summer would be the lowest of tides normally, I would think.
Well, it depends on how we
It's not
control
tidal.
the dam.
Yeah, no, it goes down, the lowest point's usually end of September, 1st of
You said,
October.
don't they drain in advance of
Yeah, they
ice?
pull it
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
before the fall rains.
I'm sure when, before that dam was built, that island was one island.
It was one island. I have pictures of maps of the city of Ellsworth that show it as one island. I have a wall hanging. that
So
shows
should we
as
keep
one.
it one island? Should we
Well,
put it back?
I'm interested in the state law. I'd like to see the law that tells you you have to assess it that way.
Well,
I haven't seen it.
if it's, see, I don't assess the lowlands. It's only the upland. So this area that, below normal high water, is in the lowlands. That's not assessed.
But Larry, as I understand it, your argument is that the two parts of the island aren't contiguous, which is very different than whether or not it's accessible.
Yes, and below normal, low water is owned by the state.
Right. And our
And there's a
argument.
10-foot channel
Yeah, but
that is
listen,
below that.
those laws came from the ocean. And we know the ocean oceans and lakes are different. And I'm kind of curious what your take on this, Larry, is. Because the ocean, we know what the tides are gonna be, and as it gets warmer, they're gonna go up and up and up. And you could predict over hundreds of years where high and low tide was. But in a lake where it's man qualified, man controlled, did this high and low thing really apply? I mean, I just don't see why it would. You can drain it down
Well,
in 1 year and,
Yeah.
and make more islands.
even to,
I just don't see how
normal-
fresh water and salt water
Yeah.
are comparable.
even to this normal low water line here, and I'm basically arguing against myself here, but once you get to normal low water, and there is that, it looks like a 10-foot channel that never goes dry, that's owned by the state. But something you pointed out, the law also says that, and here's where I'm kind of going against my argument for combining them, perhaps, is it's based on the original, how it was originally. So if those islands, if nothing was below normal low water line connecting the two, you just had two normal high water lines, originally, they would be considered contiguous.
Yeah,
But I'm also saying that I'm not assessing the lowlands.
Yeah, but on the ocean, you see the ebb and flow go, and you can predict year after year what's owned by the state and what's owned by the people. In a lake, just let the dam run for one more day, and the state owns more land. That just doesn't seem that that's what was intended for taxation purposes. I'll tip my hand, I don't like what you did, Larry, and I would vote right now to put it back in one. We'll go to the assessment phase of the project. And I know what you guys are thinking, but if you guys are thinking differently, let me know.
I'd still like to see the statute Larry quoted, because I haven't seen it. And there's some things I read in here that looks like you have an option, Larry. Now you say you have no choice.
Yes, the assessor's bylaw can combine two contiguous parcels if both parcels are 5 acres or more. That law case down in Scarborough, 2016, where the assessor was combining two lots, it was found to be not legal because both were not 5-acre lots. And,
Can I clarify just the law that I think he's relying on is actually, he was close in his citation, but off by a little bit. It's actually Title 36, Section 701 dash capital A, which comes into play if the assessor, on his own, completely on his own, wants to combine lots. He can only do it with the consent of the owner if both lots are more than 5 acres, and there's one other condition, and I forget what it is.
Can't sell.
That gives him the discretion to do things, to merge them together. That is not, what he did here was instead the opposite. On his own, he instead separated 2 lots. So I don't believe that the law on combining them on his own would apply to this conversation.
What was the law you cited?
It's Title 36, Section 701-A, which talks about
36,
kind of an assessor acting on his own to combine things. Which-
taxation, 36.
Section 701A, dash A. And again, even then, it requires the consent of the owner.
That's to merge them.
Right. So if you're relying on that in the
But if the
reverse here.
parcels were not supposed to be merged in the first place, it's the assessor's obligation to follow the law.
But do you follow the ordinance, Larry, when you have non-conforming lots that are abutting, one developed and one undeveloped? Do you follow the ordinance that says they must, shall, it's mandatory language, shall be combined to the extent possible to make them conforming? I
The
think
only way
that's-
to make this
That's if they're
this property
Two upland areas connecting. This is,
sellable is if they're
that.
combined. The only way. That's the only way you can do it. And right now, where you've separated them, and call them two, one's useless and the other one has some value. And that's taking their property without just compensation. I mean, that's the way it looks to me.
I don't know that this is a takings case.
Well,
It's a valuation
no,
case.
then you evaluate, look at the value.
We'll change the
Is that,
value if
is
you
that
don't like it.
island worth anything once, because of what Larry did?
No, change the valuation if you don't like it.
Well,
Skip the separation issue for now.
do you need any more facts to make a decision?
Is the lot buildable? Either lot?
there's nowhere on each,
You haven't got a
either
100-foot
island that
setback?
you can get a 100-foot setback.
The current structure would be grandfathered,
Grandfathered.
non-conforming.
Yeah,
But that's it.
That's it.
That's
and it could be addition.
No,
according to
because
code.
it's within 0 to 25, 0 to
Yeah.
25 feet, you can't do anything.
Anything, okay.
Nothing. And the staggered setback.
Can
in
you
our
sell a
shoreline-
non-conforming lot?
Yes. Yep.
What's a
Can you
non-conforming
create
lot
a
mean?
new non-conforming?
Something that doesn't conform to the current zoning.
Means you can't build on it?
Typically, that would mean
No.
you couldn't build something new on it.
So in any zone, if you have a lot, and you wanted to break off a piece and sell it for a separate deed,
Yep.
you could break off a non-conforming lot and sell it?
No, because you're making the already non-conforming lot less non-conforming. That's
Well, if it
illegal.
was, if it was conforming, the whole lot was conforming, then you decide you want to sell a little small parcel.
You could do that.
You could still sell a non-conforming lot,
Yeah, you could, as long as that person understood you can't build on it.
but you can't build on
That's fine.
it. Right,
You could sell a
You could sell it.
substandard lot
yeah.
that's not conforming in the ordinance. There's no law against that. But you could not take a already lot that's not conforming. You couldn't take an acre lot on Branch Lake today and split it and sell part of it to somebody else because you're already making a non-conforming lot less
What
non-conforming.
if you were selling it to a contingent owner?
You still have trouble.
You would?
Yep.
One gets big, one small.
Yeah, one gets a little less non-conforming, one
When you
gets
go to the
more
assessor and have them
non-conforming.
combine them.
But that's not the issue here. To digress.
And you wouldn't be able to
So
get
what more information do we
permits
need to make a
for-
decision?
I have an opinion, but when it comes to a decision.
But I still haven't seen the statute that says you have to look at it this way, Larry. You say that the state statutes require you to do this, and I haven't seen that statute.
Well, if you were looking at these two islands, if originally they were 2 islands, and I don't know. Originally, were they 1 island? That would be different, but I can't tell if it originally was
Before
1
the dam,
island or
wouldn't they be
2
one
islands.
What about
Before the
the,
dam went in, wouldn't they be one island?
I don't know.
I would guess they were, that dam.
Yeah, that dam brought the lake level up
That dam
3 or
up to
4
like-
feet.
well, that Branch Pond would be a hell of a lot smaller today if that dam wasn't there, I'll tell you. What, yeah,
This is on Green Lake, right?
Right.
No,
Branch,
This is Brand?
branch.
One of the exhibits was Green Lake, that's what
Right.
you were thinking.
All right, that was.
so these lots that they've cited, Larry Webb, they've given you examples of island property that goes with mainland property, and they've assessed those as one lot?
Although I note that there have been some changes since we
No.
pointed some of those out.
No. All those are island properties. That was part of this reassessment program. If there was an island but had a bar connecting it to a mainland property, but under normal high water, there's water shooting in between the two, I assessed the island as an island separately for all those properties.
Did we just come first? Because at the exact same timing that Treacher's Island suddenly got split into 2 islands is when we noted the tax cards for several others, including the Thibodeau property that you asked about, which, for the tax bill for 2018, 2019, shows an island that's quite well separated from the mainland, actually, and then a mainland parcel, and it's tax map 116, lot 1.
Have
The
you-
whole thing, and it was, and the assessed value total was 248.5. That was the same year that these 2 islands were
Yeah.
split, this was not, so that's why this
Yeah,
is part
it
of the
is,
record.
it is separate.
Is it now taxed
Well,
separately?
it would have been for 2 years, this has only been 2 years of
Yeah.
assessments this way.
2 tax bills.
There was, the one property you had at the top of Graham Lake,
The Lawson property, it had 7 islands and a mainland piece?
no, not that, the Graham Lake, the very top of Graham Lake, where actually, it wasn't islands, it was just peninsulas sticking out. They weren't islands, but.
They were non-contiguous parcels taxed as one lot.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was incorrect, and that was corrected last year.
Sounds like we've made some enemies in our abatement request by pointing out some other issues. I did take all of those records from the city.
So all 4 examples have been changed.
Well, there's only one that needed a change.
Well, you say, for instance, here, tax map 16 lot 001, an island parcel in Green Lake is taxed as one parcel together with a large mainland parcel of land off Blacks Island Road for a total of 30 acres.
Yeah, 2 acres, or 2 years ago, that was
So that's
divided
been
into
changed, that's
separate
not the case
islands.
any longer.
But at the time, the GIS and which is maps online, were not updated to show that.
But, okay, so all 4 of these have been changed that she cited?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
But I guess, getting back to what happened when God created Branch Lake, if that was one island, then it would be one island for tax bill.
Yeah, if the board believes that that was originally one big island,
What do you need to convince you that it was one island?
You don't have to
I-
ask. I'll just tell you, you don't have to ask. We'll make that decision.
Well,
for you.
I've got, for example, Branch Pond Association histories that describe it as one island. They talk about Branch Lake at one point being called Nicolin Island. And it was they thought it was a series of ponds at that point in time.
I'd like to leave the splitting issue alone and just make a motion on abating the Teachers
Yeah,
Island
but it doesn't solve
property.
their problem.
Yes, it does.
Why?
It will.
Why?
I guess my motion will be on the respective request of tax map 100 ISL-003, known as Teachers Island, Let's see, I got the right island, no, I got the wrong island.
Teaches is without the building.
Yeah, map,
Salisbury.
strike that. My motion for map 100 ISL-002 Salisbury Island with a current valuation of $62,200. I motion that the board finds that
Is that the,
that's the one with the buildings.
right.
So let's go back to the one is without the buildings. I guess the application pages are,
Teachers Island has no buildings.
okay. But on the
Salisbury Island.
on the application thing there, it talks about 21,100 in buildings. Oh, that's their request. Okay. I'll scratch that out, because that's what they want.
See, they got one that says, Steve, here's Teachers Island,
Yep.
and then here's Salisbury Island.
But they both have building
And they want
valuations.
Salisbury Island, 00, and they want Teachers Island at,
Teachers,
they got 'em- they
I'll
got
ask
'em
the
sorta
applicant,
screwed up
teachers with the
here.
building, right?
right, but then they said 00, what they should have used is the values on teachers,
Yeah.
which is 45. They're asking 45 for the land and 21 for the buildings. And then they would have a value on Teachers Island for nothing.
So I'm gonna ask,
And that way, even
Salisbury
if you
Island
didn't
has no
go back,
building.
Has a building.
It does-
Salisbury has a building.
Salisbury-
You have a building.
No, it's not mine, it's not my
You
Salisbury.
have, just keep it in your mind, Salisbury has a building.
I don't want the building.
Yeah, okay. Salisbury,
Teachers Island,
they want Salisbury Island to be 45.5 for the land and 21,100 for the building. They want the appraised value for Teachers Island, which has no building, at 0.
well, what's the current tax
Which
bill?
is essentially the reinstatement of the prior.
Salisbury Island tax bill has land and buildings, such that they just said.
The current tax bill has a little higher building value. I think it's 22.2 versus 21.1.
So you're gonna put the teachers at 0.
Well, not quite.
100,000?
Dealing with two different issues here, the evaluation and the reuniting.
Yeah.
I'm just dealing with evaluation. I'm gonna leave the uniting alone, because I don't care how many tax bills they get particularly. That may be split, maybe it's not.
Yeah, but they've asked us to rule, we have
What's
to
their-
rule.
I'm gonna
once.
rule that it's split. My motion is for the valuation for 100 ISL-003, the island known as Teachers Island with no buildings on it. I'll state a value to be
But
appraised.
you haven't heard any evidence on value, Steve. You can't just jump and say, let's do this. You have to make a decision first on do we put them back together or keep it separate. Then we go, and we have to hear evidence from the landowner on value to say whether Larry's values are unjust. That's the law. We have to follow the law. The law says we can do it. You're jumping right to it and saying, we're gonna do this. There's no basis to do it, so you can't do it. We gotta answer the question first. Do we keep them split, or do we put them back together?
Okay.
And then if you put them back together, then we go to the assessment. So you gotta do it in that order.
Okay.
So, on the issue of splitting, I'm gonna make a motion that Larry's method, although clever and probably workable on the ocean with properties that are different and valued differently, these properties are unique enough that they have no independent value and they were historically always one island. And in making islands out of whether somebody runs the water too much from the dam is not a method of making islands for assessment. So I'm moving that we put back these properties into one property and call it Teachers Island. The whole thing called Teachers Island.
I'll second that for
All,
discussion.
okay, now let's discuss it.
Okay, now, does your motion assume that back when God made this area, that it was one island? Because that's
That-
Larry's contention, that if it was, then he could justify calling it one property. Is that right, Larry? So does your motion assume that?
It does, and what I don't like is the height of the water on a lake, which is controlled by manipulation
Well, that-
instead of the ocean.
That would solve that if you assumed it.
Right, so I'm gonna assume that, like you put in, that when this was created by the glaciers.
Well,
Well,
I
no, no,
wouldn't
no,
go back.
that this was one island, and it has been made into two by manipulation by man of the water
When
levels.
the original deeds were drawn, it was before the dam was built.
And it would
Well,
be.
even when the
Hang
dam
on,
was
hang on,
built.
please. Let us talk. We're in discussion mode. You might be winning. So that's the premise of my motion.
Okay,
So when we come in here in the future and we're asked to do a lake again, and we can trace the deed back to before water levels were manipulated, it makes us have a decent basis to
Basis.
say it's one island or two, instead of, that's what I like about looking back at the deed, and it's never been split. Obviously, had they been split and sold separately, we'd have a different animal.
right.
So that's the premise of my motion. I'm moving that we combine them back into one, call it Teachers Island, based upon historic use, historic description, and historic whatever, and not based on manipulation of water by man of a lake. And we've got a second.
Second that, yeah.
All in
Should it be
favor?
Teachers Islands or Salisbury's Islands?
They want Teachers
Want
Island
Teachers?
because she's a teacher.
No, I'm not, but my dad was, and the
Do
prior
you want
owner
it
was a teacher.
Teachers or Salisbury?
Teachers.
Teacher.
Teachers Island.
I've
No,
never known
nothing to
anything
do
for
with the soldiers.
teachers.
So, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed?
I'm in favor, I just don't like the way you got there.
All right, well, so, we've made a decision that we're gonna put them back together as one and call it Teachers Island. Now we go to value, and we have to hear the assessor's value of both properties is $90-some thousand. Now, your burden as the appellant is to tell us why Larry's wrong. And you have to have evidence that is, I got the case law that Larry cited. And without evidence, do you have any evidence?
Our evidence is simply the way it was assessed when it was treated as one island historically. And we're fine with the increase in the tax assessment that resulted in this latest bill for what is now Teachers Island back together, but was that in this tax bill called Salisbury. Absolutely fine with that. That's consistent. It's the additional value that was added as a result of the split that we object to. So we do not have evidence that would say that it should be lowered in value.
You don't have any
We're-
appraisals, you don't have anything. So I want to hear from Larry, how you're asking Larry, explain how you went from 60 as a unit to 90 as 2 units.
Based on the reassessment program, I found that Branch Lake Islands, in general, and some other islands on other lakes too, it's not just Branch Lake, but some were lower than they should be based on a uniform process of appraising all islands the same way, and based on the sale information I had.
All right, in an abatement proceeding, this is the Town of Southwest
I could
Harbor?
also say that, if I may, that if.
Got it, wait.
If I were to assess this as one, the difference in land assessment would be $1,900. Because you take two unbuildable islands, make it one bigger unbuildable island. It's the reduction in value is, it's gonna go from 72,300, the way it is now, to 70,400 for land value.
I just want to read this. In an abatement proceeding, the board must undertake its responsibilities in 2 parts. The board begins its review with a presumption that the assessor's value or valuation is valid. So we assume 92,000
With
for
the building.
both is valid. But that's before we combine them, so we have some wiggle room here. All right, the taxpayer has the burden of overcoming the presumption. If the taxpayer presents sufficient evidence to meet his or her burden, the board is convinced that the assessed value was manifestly wrong, then the board has the responsibility to undertake its determination of just value and to at which reasonable abatement the board thinks is proper. So here's the question. We have no independent assessment from the landowner. They admit that, they acknowledge that. Their argument is based on, I had 2 islands that was taxed as one, and then Larry separated them and increased our tax value. should we go back to the original tax value based upon history, or can this be considered evidence, sufficient evidence to meet his burden of convincing? So there's the argument, squarely laid. We have to presume that Larry's 90,000 is valid, but the equation changed by our board decision, okay? So, does anybody have thoughts on that? We're after just value. The appellants say the just value before the splitting was 60 whatever thousand. Larry says the just value after I divide it by 2 is 90. Can we take that circumstance into consideration to go back to what the appellants want, which is just value at 60-something? Or do we have to rely on Larry's value after the change? So, thoughts and discussions. I don't think we need any more evidence on this.
Just, Larry,
This is sort of a legal sort of discussion.
you've got some of these islands in your appendix too, your sales and your assessed value. Like on Green Lake, you've got one at 8.34 acres for assessed value of 130. Now, in my simple way of thinking, if I prorate that back to 3.75 acres, that would give you a value of somewhere around
It's 2.75.
2 that's even better. So, is that the correct way of thinking? Are you
one
valuing
way
these
of
islands
thinking.
by the acre?
No.
How are you valuing?
Just like a mainland property, the first acre
Right,
the first acre of every property in town. If it's less than an acre, it's all that. But if it's more than an acre, the first acre is a base lot value. What's after an acre is the residual value
right.
at $1,500 an acre for anything in excess of that first acre. But the first acre for an island is the mainland base shorefront value for an acre, subtracting 80%.
That's what you did here.
That's for all the islands.
Do you, all right, let's say we put them back to 1. Do you still assess everything at 90,000?
It's gonna go down $1,900 for land value. The building value stays the same.
I would agree. Do you agree the building would stay the same?
Absolutely fine with the building staying the same.
Okay. It's just, what's the land value of both together versus individuals? All right. I'm trying to follow, what I'm trying to do is, if the city doesn't like our decision on the first part, and then and they don't like our decision on the second part, I want this to conform with what the law says we have to do. We've already done our putting it back together routine, all right? And we've made a record and that, but now the assessed value, it's the appellant's burden of showing by their evidence, was Larry wrong?
Well, all right, go back 3 years. What was your calculation for the land value of the one parcel? How did you come to a valuation of $40,000 for that land value?
Yep,
3 years ago.
3 years ago was based on the reassessment in 2007.
Yep.
And their reasoning, it would have been about the same, but they would not have looked at, it was more of a across the board, here's an island-based value. They weren't looking at, well, Branch Lake has the shorefront properties per acre, has a higher base price than Graham. But the other,
What is that base
So
price?
the previous calculation wasn't the base lot value minus 80% for that first acre?
What's the value of a base acre on an island on Branch? You said each
around
lot.
200,000 before the minus 80%.
If you would evaluate this now and look at these two properties combined,
Yeah,
what would be your new assessment?
it would be
Going-
70, it would drop $1,900. The two island land assessments right now is 72.3. If merged, if we set it with just one big 2.75 acre lot, it would go down to 70,400.
So that would be the new assessment
Yeah.
of both of those pieces of property combined.
Yeah.
In the building. So you'd assess
No,
both,
that's just the land.
Just land.
Oh,
just land and then 20 for the building.
You said,
22.2.
So they're still at 90.
you said
Yeah.
the base value of an acre of land on a Branch Pond Island is 20% of $200,000.
Yeah.
That's $40,000.
Yeah, that's about what it is.
So then for the other acre and 3/4, you value those at what?
It-
$1,500 an acre?
$1,500 an acre.
Well, how do you get to
So how the hell do you
72,000?
get to?
The legal question I have is.
Well, let's do the math.
Well, no, I don't want to do the math yet, because you have to, Steve, you have to look at it from their burden. Are we going to, all right, this is a unique situation, because we have two pieces of property combined back to one. And most of the assessment values and the law court opinions, they've dealt with one piece of property. They say, what's it worth? Why'd you increase it? Why'd you decrease it? But now we have two going to one. So is the fact that we've changed the sort of status of this land, is that sufficient evidence upon us to rely to say they've carried the burden of showing that Larry assessed it wrong?
We're working on that.
We're working.
Well, that's the legal question,
need the
yes or
numbers.
no?
We're still working on that.
All right, well,
You gotta follow through with his
all right,
question.
but that's the and then if you do that,
We
then
understand,
then
Mr.
we,
Lloyd.
all
Mr.
right.
Lloyd, can you please let,
Well, we're
Mr.
gonna do it
Chief
right. It
finish here?
didn't seem like it was going that way.
it is going that way.
Yeah. So there's also, your base is gonna be 20% of the mainland acre
Right.
Yes,
price.
which is
That's
$40,000.
$40,000.
But then under an acre, it would be lower. But, it's actually, there is a discount, there's a third formula in the land assessment of islands, because they have waterfront. So instead of measuring all the waterfront around, you would have one figure, but the assessment uses a waterfront price as well. So there's 3 increments in every shorefront value. You got your base value, you've got your rear land value, access land value, and then you've got a waterfront value.
So it's a multiplier.
Yes, and it's $110 a running foot, but just like one of the court cases, this is very similar where it's basically half. I just multiply by 0.5, divide by 2, the frontage of the island. And that way it's consistent for all the islands, but it has a waterfront value, a base home site value, and it has the excess land.
Excess value. Did you reassess all the waterfront properties on Branch Lake to $200,000 for the first acre?
It's, for this area, yes,
On Branch Lake,
yeah. Yeah, because I looked at this area,
so the
the
200,
closest, I looked at the closest area to these islands, and whatever those base values were, I used the same base value.
and you're saying those are all $200,000 now for the first acre
Yeah,
on the mainland?
yeah.
All
yeah,
of them?
Yes.
Even north and, Branch U Drive North and Branch U Drive South?
That doesn't matter, doesn't matter how many feet of frontage it has?
Yeah, but we have that third line. We have the waterfront line.
And you reassessed all these lots in 2018 or whenever you discovered this island mistake?
Not not, only islands.
Just the islands?
How much is a waterfront acre on Green Lake?
A little less, it's gonna be like 175,
Branch is
180,000.
more valuable than Greenland?
Well, still,
Green is less than Branch.
if you extrapolate the value of the Green Lake Islands and even put that factor in there, you're still only coming up with a land value I get of around $45,000 for the total land value. I don't see how you get to, I'd like to see the math that gets me to.
So what's 20% of 200?
40.
That's 40,000. You've got,
An acre and three quarters.
how much waterfront do we have?
I don't know.
1,600 feet times 110?
1,600 feet around that island?
No, both the islands.
Uh-huh, and that would be for both.
It would be times $55.
Yep. So, but that's how it's done. It's calculated that way. Yet there's, the waterfront is a third increment of
Well,
the
you
land
need a-
assessment.
But it's
So what was
still
it,
an island that's not
1,600?
buildable or fixed in time. I mean, they can't do anything more with this piece of property other than what they've got.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Where in the record the 1,600 linear feet is? I haven't seen that number
I
anywhere in the
haven't seen the
record.
number either.
Well, each property record card has a waterfront listing to it.
You mean this record card? Or that one, okay?
Yep.
But that's not in the record of this.
I got a tax bill.
The 1.5 acre lot, island, is,
Half of one.
it has 885 feet of frontage,
Is that anywhere
and
in
that's
our
half.
record?
Yeah, and that's half. So just that one actually was 1,600, and the other one was 650, which was half, so it has 1,300. So 1,300
Yeah.
and 1,770.
So
would be-
what did your value come up with the formula you're using, Larry? Even, now that they would be combined?
260.
We would take the 885, which is already half, and the 650 for water frontage value times 110. And that, even that is reduced by 80%. So it's $110 times all that waterfront, but also minus 80%. Even though it's just half of what it is for the, if you were to do a circumference of straight waterfront. And then you've got the, so you take off one base acre, Mr. Chairman, it leaves you 1.75 acres times 1,500.
I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to make a decision on the abatement tonight. I'd rather see him go back on the new combined islands and give a revised assessment of that and show the rationale behind it, and see if you guys want to have that abated. So we got something in writing so we don't make a mistake.
What number are you looking for?
It seems to me logical that if it was assessed at one value when it was one island 3 years ago,
But he
and he has
reassessed it.
increased the value of what we would now consider still that one island by doing it only on the Salisbury Island bill,
Yeah, but
that
what I'm,
that's reasonable.
here's,
Because it
the burden of
disregards
proof does, it favors Larry.
I understand that,
Is
and
there-
we did not hire an appraiser.
I'm gonna suggest we take a 5-minute break and see if you and Harry can go out in the hallway and come up with a number that you'll agree that this assessment's worth, so we don't have to come back another night.
Okay, you wanna do that? Sure, we're happy to do that.
5-minute
I'm not
break.
sure.
Larry, negotiate.
Well, I'm gonna suggest to Larry, it should be a whole lot less than what you're charging them now.
Because I gotta tell you, I don't, go negotiate, please. Thank you.
A whole lot less.
We all set?
Pretty
Hi,
close.
welcome back.
Thank you.
Have you come up with a
I
appraised
think we've
value?
agreed
quote?
on a land value of 47, and then
And-
22 building value.
22,200? And are you comfortable with that?
We were sent to compromise.
Are you comfortable with
I'm
that?
comfortable with it.
All right, it's always best to have the landowner participate in the values. You've come here today, we've combined the lots back, Larry will take care of that in the records. I don't think you have to do anything in the registry of deeds since this is tax. He will adjust it. Now, as far as back going, when it goes back to, Larry will take care of that too. Larry is one honorable gentleman, even though we pick on him. And he does a good job, but this is a
Sundays.
really unique circumstance, and this is the ones we tend to get. And we don't always agree with Larry, but most of the time we do. We do like to pick on him.
So we're gonna see, we're gonna
go
abate them this
retroactive.
year's taxes back to this new $70,000 value.
So,
Retroactive.
You're good with us?
I'm very good with it,
And you like it
retroactive.
being called teachers?
you were asking for a land value of 45,500?
47, we agreed on 47,
That's what you were asking for when you came here tonight?
so we went
45,500?
up to 47.
I'm moving to adjourn. I wish you all the best. Thank you
Yeah,
for coming,
easy.
Larry. Thank you. You're always gentlemen as always. All in favor?
Wait a minute, I think we have to,
need to make a motion about,
we still
Well,
have
they've
to-
come to an agreement. We don't have to decide nothing. So, yeah, we've already made a motion and decided that it's back together. They made their own agreement. We don't have to bless this mess and make a decision. We're done.
Yeah,
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? All opposed? There we
I'll
go.
second the motion for the record.
There we go.
Thank you.
Post-mortem, I guess.
Steve, shall we?